Welcome to the Happy, Healthy Life Podcast with your hosts, Rob and Randy, who reveal the truth, the lies, and confusion about health so that you are no longer the victim to mainstream medical dogma and you are the hero to your own happy, healthy story.
Hello, and welcome back to the Happy, Healthy Life Podcast with your host, Rob and
Randy.
And we are
laughing about that. We're the happy, healthy guys. But I want to know, what are you? We just roll right into the episode laughing. Did I miss something?
There's all kinds of craziness always going on in my head. But hey, here's the thing. We've been told for decades that sugar and carbs are the enemy. But what if we told you that that's all total BS? Today, you're going to want to listen up because we're going to expose the lies about sugar and why cutting carbs could actually be wrecking your metabolism and what you need to do instead to burn fat, increase your energy levels, and enjoy your food again.
What? Enjoy food? You know me, it's crazy because there's so many people, there's so much guilt and shame and anxiety around eating. And it's crazy because I can't imagine back in the day, our ancestors, that they were really worried or freaked out when they were eating, because it was like, you eat when you're hungry, you're thankful for it. And when you're hungry, if you have food, you eat again. If you don't, you need to go find food. But I just can't imagine how we've got into a world where now eating really has become a sin and there's guilt around it, when, eating is not a sin. Actually, it's kind of have to have it to live and survive. So this is fun too, because carbs, just like saturated fats, they've been vilified as well.
They have been vilified, and it's one of those things that it's hard to unwire and or rewire our brain when we've been taught something literally our entire lives. And we talk about that so much when we talk about calories, the calories in, calories out, move more, eat less. Been ingrained into us. I still, as I think even to being a kid, how sugar had been vilified. And my mom was like, don't eat sugar. And then she's like, don't eat fat. Don't eat that avocado. Don't eat that bread. Don't eat that rice. Don't eat that pasta. It's just all of those things. I'm like, well, what in the world do you eat? And I think really, as I look back, that's probably why I did. Why I was anorexic when I was 13 years old, is because I really just didn't want to eat anything. So for me, it was just easier just to not eat versus put anything into my body that was actually going to make me gain weight or be fat. Why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
And then you start studying, quote, nutrition. And then that's just a load of crap as well, because it's still teaching you calories in, calories out. Granted, for myself, I was eating healthier food probably than what I was eating before, but that's when I started learning more about nutrients, putting nutrients into my body, but I still had that old wiring or faulty wiring in there, that it was still about the calories. And God forbid that you would eat a bowl of rice, or God forbid you would eat some actual bread. However, there was a real reason, though, that when I did, and I was that person that did eat the bread, I would gain like 5 pounds just eating it. That's actually a real thing. And we're going to talk about why that happens, but also why you do need the carbohydrates in your body. Because here's the reality, is that your body has to have carbohydrates, and we can let's get into that. We're gonna dive into the geeky stuff first. So what is sugar? What is a carbohydrate? Carbohydrates really come in a couple of different forms. You've got simple carbs, which actually come in either monosaccharides or disaccharides. And so me yesterday, we were talking to one of our buddies, Dylan Jamela. He's been on a podcast, and as we were on the podcast, sometimes, I got to be doing something with my hands, with my nervous energy sometimes, or my energy needs somewhere to go. So I'm over here making fats. This is what I was doing with my little organic chemistry set over here. I'm loving this thing, being over here. It gives me something to do. But what this is right here, this is a disaccharide. So this is actually two glucose molecules put together, which is a disaccharide. You can make a monosaccharide, which is just one, something like glucose, for example, would be an example of a monosaccharide, or galactose or fructose. Those are all monosaccharides. Disaccharides are two of these put together. And then you have complex carbohydrates, which are polysaccharides, which are long chains of these things all put together. So that really is what sugar is. But they all have a purpose inside your body. God gave us fruits for a reason. We have vegetables for a reason. We have proteins for a reason. We have fats for a reason. But here's the thing that you have to know about these carbohydrates, or even, the sugar or glucose specifically, is glucose really is needed in the body. It's the preferred source of fuel for the mitochondria to be able to produce energy. So it's kind of like gasoline that you would put in your car. That's the preferred source of fuel, because your engine is able to combust that in order to be able to create energy and make your car go. So your body needs then this sugar, or it loves the glucose in order to be able to make energy. It's a preferred source. It's not the only source, because as we talked about last week with the fats, we talked about the saturated fats, the unsaturated fats. Your body also uses that for fuel as well, which is more efficient. And there's a reason for that as well. And we'll talk about the purposes for both of those. But yeah, let's talk about the fats.
Well, it just goes back to, your body needs fuel. It needs fuel to make energy, for repair, for healing, for detoxification. And there's two main sources of fuel. We did talk about fats, and we also talked about the dangers of seed oil, because obviously your body can't metabolize seed oil, and it can't be, that's not true. It can metabolize it. It can't use it for energy. And the metabolism of seed oil obviously is very damaging to the body and wrecks the mitochondria. But the other source of fuel that's not fat, is carbohydrate. And like you said, all carbohydrates, no matter whether they're complex or they're bread, rice, cereal, pasta, fruit, whatever, they all break down to glucose or dextrose, which is a simple sugar in its most simple, usable, digestible form. So God did make fats and he did make sugars, because the body can use both of them. And this is why we've been talking a lot about metabolic flexibility. It's a big buzzword out there where people talk about being able to use fats and carbohydrates for energy. Unfortunately, most people, they're not metabolically flexible, and so they can only use fat or only use sugar, or maybe they're not even efficient at either one of those, which is typically the case. But if sugar is a fuel source and the body does need it, and here's how we know the body needs it. If you don't eat it, the body is going to make it, right? Just like cholesterol. If you don't eat it, your body's going to make it. These are essential things for your body. So it's called gluconeogenesis, where your body actually will use amino acids, proteins to create glucose. So if your body's not getting it, your body will make it. And that's very powerful, because it's really a powerful rescue device that the body has to keep us alive, to nourish our body, because your brain needs glucose, your reproductive system needs glucose, your body has to have it. So I think it's interesting when you think about your body, if you don't eat it, it's going to make it. So we know having glucose available to the body, it is essential.
It is essential. And I learned that all too well when you started having the eliminate sugar, or the no sugar craze
all
going
the
on.
keto, paleo people of the world, right? And we've all been guilty of it.
I was that person of the world. And if you look at photos of me back then, that was probably like 16 years ago. And when I go back, thank you, Facebook, for showing us those memories. And I go back and I look at those memories will pop up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because that's when I was eating zero sugar at all, and just eating a bunch of protein. And I had these like dark circles under my eyes. I would get to the point where I was consuming maybe 1,000 calories, and it was still hard for me to stay at a quote healthy weight. It's because I was starving my body of an essential nutrient that it needed for fuel. And so, and that's what people don't really understand. And I obviously didn't understand it back then. Heck, I was coming from the, no fat craze. And here's the thing, here's the breaking news. What's the news sound? The breaking news. Sugar is not the devil.
So right, it's not the devil. Now here's the thing. Processed sugar has demonic tendencies. Let's just put it that way. But real natural sugar is not the enemy. So here's the real myth. that we've been told. Let's bust this myth. The myth is that when you eat, especially if you eat carbohydrates and you have a blood sugar increase, or they call it a blood sugar spike, and getting a postprandial, so after you eat, increase in insulin, that is dangerous for your health, which is why they want you to tell, hey, no sugar, low carb, don't spike your blood sugar, because if you secrete insulin postprandial after the meal, that is dangerous. It's going to make you store fat. So that really is the myth. So before we completely unpack that myth, here's some of the benefits, by the way, of a postprandial after you eat insulin response. Number one is it regulates. Insulin is it could be considered a master hormone because it does regulate your energy storage. How you utilize energy is dependent on your ability and your body's ability to secrete insulin. It also, you can't become insulin sensitive where your cells take up the glucose unless you actually eat carbohydrates, which can create more insulin sensitivity. Insulin's responsible for that. Satiety. That's the big buzzword now. And this is why this big crave of GLP-1 drugs is everywhere, because it's supposed to help artificially create satiety, and it does. But insulin, once released postprandial, it actually activates your body's own natural GLP-1 response in your small intestine, along with another peptide called PYY. It's a peptide that creates fullness and satiety. It also activates the hormone cholecystokinin, which tells you that you're full. So eating food, having a postprandial insulin response for energy, for satiety, and also for electrolytes. Guys, you'll lose electrolytes after a meal at the kidney level, like sodium and potassium, if you don't have insulin. So insulin helps make sure that your electrolytes stay in the cell, nutrients get in the cell, you're satisfied, you're full, you have good insulin sensitivity. So insulin really isn't the devil. And I believe they've misled us that a glucose spike or that a raise in blood sugar is basically the worst thing that could ever happen to you.
Okay, so then that asks the question. So when we see things like, things that are high up, for example, this is where this came into play, I think, is when you started having the glycemic index.
Yes.
Came out. And
Yes.
so glycemic index, if you look at it, like 100 would be like just straight sugar, or straight glucose would be a glycemic index of 100, for example. Then you've got like fructose, I think is a lot lower. It's like somewhere in the 40s. So the theory then was that if you ate a lot of foods that were high up on the glycemic index, would then spike up your insulin levels, which would put your body into a state of fat storage, just because it spiked the cortisol levels up. And so that's why people are like, oh my God. They would literally go to the grocery store with this chart of the glycemic index, and they would buy everything that was low on the glycemic index, eat as many of those foods as they possibly can, versus the one that spiked their insulin levels up. So what are your thoughts about that?
No, that's good. Really, the glycemic index is really, in my opinion, it's BS. It's bullcrap, because the glycemic index really has nothing to do with whether the food is healthy or not, or if it even contains proper nutrients, right? So the glycemic index was born out of this food industry, which would say, hey, these foods are fine, yet these foods aren't even food, they're processed food, or they're depleted of nutrients. So having blood glucose elevate, by the way, your blood glucose in a reasonably healthy person eating real food, your blood glucose doesn't spike. That's a lie. Let's say it goes up to 130, 140, 150. There's nothing wrong with that, because now your body is going to secrete insulin, which is going to help move the glucose from the bloodstream into the cells, and it's going to come back down over the next 1 to 2 hours. That is a normal human metabolic phenomenon. So the glycemic index is complete bullcrap, because there really isn't any solid evidence around using the glycemic index and better metabolic outcomes. Remember, if you have high blood sugar or you've got out of control insulin levels, that's metabolic disease, right? So this is when your body actually is making glucose in the presence of insulin. That is a metabolic condition where your body is sick, you're type 1, type 2 diabetic, you don't have insulin sensitivity, your body's toxic, you're inflamed, or maybe you're getting synthetic insulin, or God forbid you had some insulin producing tumor in your body, which would be almost a never situation. But there are other scenarios that can present themselves. But going back to what you said, guys, if you're using the glycemic index to choose how you fuel your body, you're going to be making huge mistakes, and you're making decisions based off illogical fallacy. It's logical fallacy. It's not even true. And that whole index was developed by the food industry, which we know clearly doesn't care about our health.
No, you're looking at a number. So you're looking at things quantitatively. You're not looking at things qualitatively, which is why we always say, don't count calories, count your nutrients.
Right.
And a lot of people don't even realize that you also need glucose is important for liver detoxification.
Yeah.
It's important for being able to convert even T4 into T3, which is the usable form of
you'll
thyroid
wreck
hormone.
your thyroid on these low carb carnivore keto diets that you do for 6, 12, 18 months, no question. Even for hydration, you can't hydrate correctly without glucose. So you need electrolytes, you need water, but you also need glucose in order to shuttle these nutrients and electrolytes into the tissue. So that's why the most hydrating thing ever, which I love, is fruit juice. And of course, I said fruit juice has a high glycemic index. Well, I can tell you this, they've already done the studies on it. You can look at eating oranges and drinking fresh squeezed orange juice, and there really isn't any difference whatsoever in how the body metabolizes that sugar. In fact, some studies would show that actually doing the orange juice, less all of the fiber for somebody who's really not metabolically healthy, or maybe somebody who has GI problems or gastrointestinal distress, is easier to absorb and can help mitigate a lot of the problems from eating processed foods, specifically processed sugar like high fructose corn syrup, which is very inflammatory, creates a lot of endotoxin in your gut and inflammation. It can help mitigate those problems by drinking fresh squeezed orange juice. Now, that really flies in the face of the food industry and conventional thinking and conventional medicine tactics and ideas, because they would tell you, well, drinking juice definitely is going to make you a diabetic. Guys, there isn't one study anywhere, and if you can find it, let us know, showing where drinking fresh squeezed juice is indicated in causing diabetes. In fact, you can't even make anybody a diabetic unless you give them processed food, specifically seed oil. That's how you make lab animals where they're doing experiments. That's how you make them a diabetic. You can't just give them sugar. You have to give them seed oil.
Yeah, because they're saying it goes back to the all calories are created equal. They're basically saying that then all of these carbohydrates are created equal, which is not true either, because like we said earlier, when you look at the monosaccharides, you've got glucose, but you also have something else in there called fructose. And it is very hard. When they did this, I think it was like back in the in the early 90s when they were doing the science about when they were saying that you shouldn't do all of this fruit or put all this fruit in your body because your body's going to actually turn it into fat. That's actually false. Biochemically speaking, the body can't even do that. It's very hard for the body to take the fructose and turn the fructose into fat. So
well, yes, as long as it's not a naked sugar, so to say, it's not isolated fructose.
Correct.
Yeah, getting it in a combination, because like honey has fructose.
Yes,
but it also has sucrose, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So the process is called de novo lipogenesis. Yeah. And so when they were doing the studies, what they were doing is they were taking the fructose and they were feeding it to mice. Mice actually can turn it into fat. Human beings, we're different than mice.
A little bit.
So it doesn't work that way with us. And so it was actually bad science that they were using to show that, because like you were saying, when you do take things like the fructose that comes from things like honey or the orange juice, all of those different things, what they said is it would be almost impossible to create an overweight person utilizing those types of fruits. And so that's great news for people like me that was like, heck to the no, I'm not going to drink that orange juice because that's going to make me fat. Or no way, I'm not going to put honey in my coffee because that's going to make make me fat. But that's what I was taught early on, because I didn't realize that, qualitatively, we're not comparing, no pun intended, apples to apples or oranges to oranges.
Yeah.
We were comparing apples to oranges, there's no comparison.
Here's some cool studies too around that topic that I love, because this is where, and one of the most damaging things to the human metabolism is called endotoxin or metabolic endotoxemia. And that's essentially just basically when you're getting a lot of undigested food that's actually making it all the way down into your colon. And what will happen is your body will create a systemic inflammatory response, because most food should be digested before it even gets to your colon. That's why eating real food nutrition plays such a huge role. But when you're eating fake food and processed food and artificial sweeteners and flavorings and colorings and processed grain, high fructose corn syrup, and all these chemicals and fake foods, you're putting serious inflammation on your gut. So what they're showing was that orange juice, also raw apple juice, actually lowered endotoxin in the colon, because all of that nutrition's getting absorbed in your small intestine. So it's not even making it to your colon to cause any type of an inflammatory response. They showed that you could mitigate from a high-fat processed food, high-fat, high-carb meal, that eating these type fresh juices can mitigate the damage. And then there was a huge study done on diabetics, which is interesting because if you're a diabetic, what is the one thing they tell you you can never have? You can't have sugar, right? You can't have processed sugar.
Yeah, they tell you that you can't
artificial.
have
They give you artificial sweeteners, right?
Exactly, which is crazy.
Like you talk to your diabetic uncle, and Aunt Susie's making him an apple pie using sucralose or Splenda, and his blood sugar didn't spike. It's all repeating the same, propaganda and the talking points that are just based off a logical fallacy. They're just not true. So what they did is for 8 weeks, they were giving diabetic patients 50 grams of honey a day. Do y'all know how much 50 grams of honey per day is? That's like 6, 7, 8 tablespoons of honey. And what they showed was that the diabetics' glucose tolerance, their ability to take up glucose, improved, and their triglycerides went down. These are in diabetic patients. So remember, insulin resistance isn't mean that insulin's not a problem. We vilify insulin. It's not insulin, it's the cell's ability to take up glucose in the presence of insulin. So if you have high insulin or have insulin resistance, it's because your cells aren't healthy and they're not glucose sensitive. From seed oil, from toxins, from all other types of chemicals that can disrupt our mitochondria. So how amazing is it that you're eating honey for 8 weeks and diabetic patients actually improve glucose tolerance and improve their lipid profiles? Really pretty powerful study. And we've seen that over and over and over. In fact, metabolic syndrome has been shown to greatly benefit from eating natural sugars and natural carbohydrates. But here's the key. And this is something that we want to be clear about. Remember, sugar, carbohydrates are an energy source, so is fat. So if you're going to eat more carbohydrates, you don't want to eat them and also eat high fat. Remember, pick an energy source. If you're going to eat more fat, eat less carbohydrate. Good rule of thumb. And if you're going to eat more carbohydrate or eat more carbohydrate, eat less fat. Your protein's kind of that fulcrum on the seesaw there. So they're going to compete for those energy, receptor sites, for lack of a better word, in your mitochondria and your cells. So you don't want to eat high carb, high fat. But eating real carbohydrates, eating real fats in their natural state, along with healthy proteins, this is really the way forward. And you don't have to ever start counting macros or counting calories. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff because you're eating nutrient-dense food. And I can tell you right now, coming from a guy like you, and for me, I was the low-carb guy forever. I didn't eat any carbohydrates. I ate high protein, high fat, paleo, carnivore, keto, and now completely different, where now I eat lots of healthy carbohydrates. Honey, I eat probably 3 to 4 tablespoons of raw honey every single day, maybe 4, 6, 8 fresh squeezed oranges, grapefruits, lemons, limes. I eat lots of carbohydrates now, yet I'm leaner and stronger, and I have way better thyroid function now because it's really easy to burn fat when you give your body these natural sugars and you're eliminating seed oil and processed food. However, if you're eating processed food and seed oil and you're eating a bunch of carbohydrates, you are going to tank your body and you're going to create a metabolic environment that's conducive to blood sugar issues and diabetes. Remember, the seed oil blocks the body's ability to actually use the glucose, and all the processed food, sugar, and carbs can actually throw you out of balance. So we want to be clear. We're not saying sugar is good. We're not saying go out and eat a bunch of even natural sugar. What we are saying is real sugar could be very beneficial to your thyroid, to your hormones, to your metabolism, to your mitochondria, to your energy, to your sleep, to your circadian rhythms, really how your body repairs and heals. Avoiding natural sugar, I think, is a huge mistake.
It is a huge mistake because glucose is your brain's main source of energy. A lot of people don't realize that it's made up of fats, which is why you got to have the fats, but its main source of fuel and energy is going to be glucose, which is why if you eliminate it, that's where people start getting, and this was me, where I was tired all the time. I felt mentally fatigued, mentally exhausted.
Yes.
This is why also, even with our program that people actually consult with us to do, is there you are eating carbohydrates with our program. You are eating fats. You are eating the fruits. That's why it's in there. It's in there for a reason. But here's the other thing too is, and I thought this was interesting, is that, like, for example, like your red blood cells and the retina cells in your eyes, they don't actually have a mitochondria in there. And so because there's no mitochondria,
the lens of your, they don't even have any cells.
So they can only use glucose as energy. So that's why you even, and I would even feel when I wouldn't eat any sugar, I could feel like my eyes would start getting tired. And that's why that is, because you have to have those nutrients inside your body. So just like you were saying, also in combination and making sure, like with that seesaw right there, and we'll put also in the show notes and the outline, good sources of the fructose that we're talking about, good sources of the sugar versus the bad ones, and the ones to absolutely not do, because you don't want to do the processed sugars, which is not even a real thing, like the high fructose corn syrup, for example. Not a good thing for you in there. We want to make sure that you're doing things that are unprocessed. Even here's one that a lot of people think is a healthy sugar.
Okay.
Agave. That one is a no-no, that you don't want to put that into your body. So be wary of that. And then obviously you guys already know, like the processed cookies, the processed cakes, the energy drinks, even the big one right now, and they'll give it to kids. And I was just at my son's soccer game last night, as a matter of fact. And, they'll give these kids like the Gatorade, for example, because they're thinking that it's going to give them that quick burst of energy. However, because of all the things that we're talking about right now, that's not a good source of quick energy. The body should be able to provide its own sources of quick energy that you could even get. It'd be better than drinking the fruit, or better than drinking the energy drink, just having a glass of orange juice, for example.
Well, that would be perfect. Add some trace mineral salt, some orange juice. One of my favorite things is to actually juice fresh oranges and then put actually like coconut amino acids in there. With a little bit of, it's got a little extra, the coconut nectar, along with some of the trace mineral salts in there, or maybe even adding some aged organic balsamic vinegar to give it a little more of the acetic acid to support the nutrient absorption and the fat, or the body's ability to burn fat for energy. But I'll tell you, and we even got a question that came through here. What about the people in the carnivore world and the low carb world who said, hey, I cut out all my carbohydrates. I was able to reverse my diabetes, my blood sugar now tests, on a fasted blood glucose. It's now, 94 in the mornings, and before it was 130. Okay. Can you definitely reverse a lot of the diabetic problems by going on a low carb or a carnivore or a keto? No doubt about it. But it's more of a treatment short term. Long term, what happens is you're going to create a stressful environment. And here's what will happen when you don't eat carbohydrates. And we say don't eat carbohydrates, probably anything below 50. A lot of studies would say you probably need closer to 150 to 180 per day, even just to meet metabolic needs if you're remotely active. But let's say you're going low carb. You do this for a while, what will happen is your body will create what's called physiological insulin resistance. So it's not pathological. It's a natural phenomenon that your body is doing based off the environment that you created, which, remember, your body's always doing the right thing under the environment that you created. So if you're not eating carbohydrates for a period of time, your body will now create that insulin resistance because it needs to preserve any and all glucose that you have for the body's needs and for the brain and for the gonads and for other parts of the body that's going to need the glucose. So what will happen is your liver and your muscle cells become insulin resistant. They will not take up glucose because your body's conserving and it's having to make it. That's a high stressful state that can be great in short periods of time, because I can imagine there are probably times where you didn't have food, there wasn't access to glucose or carbs or even food in general. So your body had to adapt, which is good. Hormetic stress, adaptation's good. But long-term caloric and carbohydrate restriction will create high levels of cortisol, high levels of stress, and it will completely tank your thyroid. Your thyroid is gone. You lose your hair. You don't have energy. There's no sex drive. You crush your metabolic needs when you do this. So this is why it's so important to not be extreme with anything. Cutting out a major food group for a long period of time just doesn't make any sense, especially when you're eating real foods, which is what we've been talking about forever. Simply eat real food, or our new acronym SciFi, single ingredient food items. So SciFi. So eggs, apple, orange, beef. These are single ingredient food items that your body knows how to utilize. It's nutrient dense, that actually promotes metabolic health versus tanking it.
Yeah, so it's God gave us all these things, so they all are supposed to be in there. It's this. The thing that you hear people say all the time is they'll go, everything in moderation, which is one of the dumbest things I think that you could ever say, and here's why. It's because it's
that's cracking me up. Everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation.
Like,
all right. If my son came to me and said,
moderation.
Hey, Dad, everything in moderation. I'm smoking weed. It's just it's in moderation. It's gonna be a no. But anyway, whole different topic. But here's the thing: is the reason we don't like that is because if you don't have optimal cellular function, okay. It really doesn't matter.
There you go.
If your cells at a cellular level don't know how to efficiently create energy, which is really what these calories are, if it can't efficiently create usable energy inside your body, you end up being that person that only eats like 1,000 calories a day, and you can't figure out how come your body is not burning fat or you're still overweight. It's because you don't have optimal cellular function.
You got it.
So you got to make sure that you have optimal cellular function, and then you may be able to do things more in moderation like that and have a better effect on your body. And so, the first place that I would go if I was you is go to metabolismscore.com, find out how your metabolism is doing. And then we give you instructions on where to go from there. But you've got to start somewhere. It's not the end all be all. Mm-hmm. However, it's a great place to start to be able to get a good foundation. And I think the next place that's going to be a good place to go on next week's podcast, because we could talk about this all day long, but on next week's podcast, because we didn't talk a lot even about like the complex carbohydrates, for example. We should talk about the grains, the myths with gluten, and your gut.
Yeah.
Grain, gut, and gluten. And so,
what are the best carbohydrates to eat,
the best
right?
Ones for you. So we'll talk about that. We'll give you the list of the carbohydrates. If you've got questions about these things, let us know at the H2 Life, our Instagram. Let us know what kind of questions that you have, and we're going to continue to keep on giving you guys level things that you can be doing on a daily basis and debunking these myths that everybody has believed their entire life, and they rewired your brain the wrong way. But something that would be level that you could do even now is depending on when it is that you're breaking your fast, something that could be a great combination is eating some eggs with your good, healthy, short-chain fatty acid being your SCT oil with a glass of orange juice.
Oh, man.
That'd be a great way to break your fast, because now, like you said, now you've got your fats, you've got your fructose in there as well. You've got the energy that you need for your brain. You're actually helping to heal the gut at the same time. Heck, if you did our gut health program, that would probably help as well. We'll talk more about that even next week. However, there's so many health benefits of that. But, for those of you guys who are still struggling, it's because you're probably trying to do these things with bad cellular function on a bad metabolism.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of you just need help. We can talk in concepts and lay these constructs out that make sense, but a lot of you are just metabolically sick. So that's why we created our metabolism program. That's why we created our gut health program that shows you how to heal the gut and reintroduce the right carbohydrates to actually show you that they're not going to make you sick, overweight, and unhealthy. But if the foundation is off, like you said, it just doesn't matter. Because, some people, I always say it's not necessarily always what you're eating, but what is your body doing with the food when you eat it? Is it using it, burning it for the body's good, or is it so sick that it's just storing it as body fat? And a lot of people now, we know the numbers, almost 94% of America is metabolically sick. So they're not fat adapted, they're not carb adapted, they don't have metabolic flexibility to go back and forth between fat and carbohydrates for energy. Their mitochondria are sick. They're poisoned. Their body is in complete level of stress. So these are, if that's you, all these things may have some limited, benefits to you, but ultimately you're never going to get where you want to go unless you really take on the metabolism problem head on. And unfortunately, if you're like all of us, we kind of all grew up the same way. A lot of us, for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, a lot of the things we were doing were just based off things that we believed were true that weren't true, especially around nutrition. And God bless our parents, and they loved us. And you as parents out there, you love your kids, but my gosh, you think about the things that we've done to our bodies and to our kids' bodies, and those things build up over time. So if you wake up in this world and you're 30, 40, 50 years old or older, and you haven't had a plan or looked outside the conventional teaching and the grooming that they've done with us from day one, you're metabolically sick and you need help. So this is why we've created our programs. We want to help people get that victory, regain their health. And it can be so simple when you have help and guidance. Some people are ready for that, Dr. Rob. Some people are still going to be hard-headed and keep trying to figure it out on their own, which costs them more time, more money, when we've made things very, very simple.
Well, if you're listening to this, you're not trying to figure it out on your own. So thank you for allowing us to be able to help you. And just remember, you know what? Health is all about the way your body is adapting chemically, physically, and emotionally. It's about having a healthy metabolism, optimal cellular function. That means that your body is nice and warm. You've got great sleep. You've got plenty of energy. You've got a healthy libido, healthy sex drive. You've got great skin, great nails, great hair, great digestion. Your body is detoxing. And you know what? You've got plenty of muscle mass as well, because here's the cool thing too, is your body loves to burn fat. That's something that I didn't talk about, but your body loves fat for fuel at rest, which is why if your body is not fat adapted and your body is a sugar burner and it only knows how to burn glucose for fuel, your metabolism is not healthy. And that's why you crave the sweets as soon as you're finished eating a meal. That's why you've got not just a sweet tooth, but you've got sweet teeth. There's something else going on and you are not healthy. So
yeah, and that's a good point too, by what you said there. Your body in a healthy metabolic state will burn fat at rest, but under stressful exercise conditions, your body switches over its metabolic needs to glucose, which is why after a workout, guess what one of the best things you can do to help repair your cells and give your body what it needs is fruit.
I thought you were going to say sex.
Maple syrup, sex. No, don't. I mean, maybe that's probably not going to hurt you either. Maybe that is your exercise session. So after you have sex, have a glass of orange juice.
All right,
forget the cigarette. But the point is, your body does shift over its metabolic needs, which is why after a workout, that's a great time to give your body raw honey, maple syrup, fruit juice, coconut water. Those are great times to give your body that, because your body is really wanting that, but it's understanding your body's metabolic needs, which is so powerful. Fruit and honey and carbohydrates are not the enemy, and healthy fats are not the enemy. The enemy is anything that's telling you to eat multiple times a day and that processed food is fine and that seed oils are heart healthy. You know better than that if you've been following us even a little bit. So let's share the message, share the podcast. God, if you liked anything that we said, please please share, give us a review. This really helps get the message out in a world where it feels like people have been lied to and they believe so many things that are keeping them sick. We got to wake them up. Sometimes this could be a way to wake them up.
There you go. So like it, share it, comment, give us a review. 5 stars are the best. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming along with this on this happy, healthy ride with us. Have a great rest of your day.
God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Happy Healthy Life podcast. If you enjoy the show, make sure to follow them on Instagram at the H2 Life or on YouTube and Facebook at the Happy Healthy Guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.